Hello and welcome to another Marty's Matchbox Makeovers. Today I am making over the number 44C GMC refrigerator truck. These first came out in 1967 and were deleted from the Matchbox range in 1971. They came out in this red and teal colour. This one has been repainted by the previous owner with this green, thick green paint, and also this rear door is missing, so I'm going to have to get a replacement part for that. First up, I'm going to remove this rivet. Today I'm using these thin cardboard vice clamps because those big orange rubbery ones just seem to get in the way. Now I don't want to over tighten the vice here as I could distort the model. Now I'm drilling out this rivet quite carefully using an undersized drill. All I want to do is remove the head of the rivet so that I don't make a huge hole in the plastic base. Whenever I drill these days, I always make sure to recover all of the metal filings. If they get into the carpet, I end up with them sticking into my feet, and they are quite uncomfortable. So after I've done that, I lever the base off with a flat-bladed screwdriver. And here you can see that when the previous owner painted the cabin red, they also painted the headlights, grille and bumper bar red. To remove this transparency, I've got to remove 2 rivets today, but they don't only hold the transparency in, they also hold the rear structure, the container on the back, to the body. So now that I've drilled those out, I remove all of the metal filings first and then give a couple of hard taps and the transparency falls out. I will clean up and polish this transparency later on. Now it's time for a bit of a wiggle and a tug, and the base separates from the rear cargo hold. I'm not too sure what to call that big green bit. Here is our first look at the original colour paint. Now I'm going to have to paint strip these, but before I do that I'm going to match these colours. This little area behind the cabin is the original teal colour. Normally I would take that little end off the axle to remove the wheels, but today I'm going to use these steel and aluminium pop rivets to make some new axles. It's something I'm experimenting with. I've done it once before, but these look like they're the exact same size as the originals, so hopefully they'll turn out good. Now looking at this, there's the red colour that I've got to replicate. I've got 3 different types of red. They're all Mr. Hobby brand. There's the number 3, which is gloss. There's number 327, which is also gloss. But I've also got this 3rd red, which is a number 467. But it's actually a flat matte paint. So if I use that, I'll end up having to varnish the truck at the end, which is not a big deal because I normally do it, I just don't show it. So I've mixed up all the paints and I'm taking one little blob of each red and placing it on the back here where the original colour is unpainted. And out of the 3, I think that the first one, which I think is number 3, yes, I think that one is the most appropriate for this model. So that is the one that I shall be going with. Now when I'm working, I work on these cardboard pads that I cut out of drinks cartons and various other cardboard boxes, and they're really handy to have around as they prevent any paint from getting on my expensive cutting mat. Now as for the teal, I'm using these Vallejo colours. I've got the number 70 blue and the number 72 deep green. I'm not too sure what the name of the blue is. The green is the deep green, so I'm adding the deep green to the blue because you always add the darker colours to the lighter. I've found it's kind of easier to get to the colour where you're going if you're adding the darker colours to the light. So looking at that, I think there needs to be a little bit more green. Now it's more of a teal colour. I'll put a little bit on there. It's close, but I think it's maybe a shade too light. What should I do? I just checked these paints and they are actually water-based acrylics. So these thinners are suitable to use with these paints. So I'm just thinning it down to see whether it makes any difference to the colour. I'll put a little dab on there and double check. No, it's definitely too light. I need to add a drop of black to this. I'll just reset here and remove the paint that I've put on. Now this is Tamiya paint. This is also water-based acrylic, I believe. Whatever, I know it's compatible with these Vallejo paints because I've used it before. So I'll give it a bit of a mix again. Hopefully this will be the one I'm looking for. Yes, I think that piece of that little dab of paint there I've just put on matches almost exactly the colour of the original paint. So I'm happy with that. So I'm going to be using this tomorrow. So to keep it fresh, I wrap it in some cling film or shrink wrap, whatever you call it, and set it aside. Now I'm chomping these axles off because, as you remember, I'm going to make some new ones out of those pop rivet shanks. So I need to take these wheels off to clean them because the previous owner painted them. There are many methods of removing paint from plastic parts. A new idea that a subscriber suggested was using Dettol disinfectant. I must admit I was a little bit skeptical, but I thought, well, I'll give it a go. So I went out and bought some Dettol and I'm dunking these in and I'm going to leave them to soak for a couple of hours. And I've also put the windscreen in there because that's got some red paint on it. And why not indeed, I'm going to chuck the base in there of the cabin also to try and get that red paint off that I couldn't get with those bulbous cotton buds. Now I've got to paint strip the chassis and the body using this polish stripper gel paint stripper that I use. It's my favourite product, I always use it. I apply it with an old paintbrush that I'm not too concerned about, and I just scrub it around until it's covered all of the paint, and I sit back and wait. Some paint is unaffected by this product and I haven't worked out why. The majority of paints come off very easily, and this red is one of those paints. As you can see, look, it's just falling off, minimal pressure, and so is the green. Look, straight back to the metal with one coat. Just brilliant stuff, so satisfying. When I've got most of the gel off, I just bung them into this water and give them a final rinse off and a scrub. And you generally find that 99% of the paint comes off at this stage. If not, I just pick away at it with pins and toothpicks, etc. Please notice that when I'm using this product, I have rubber gloves on. On the grill here, on the refrigeration unit, there's a grill, and the green paint didn't want to come off that too easily, so I had to redo that little section. But there we go. I now place them on some kitchen towel and wait for them to dry. I can put that back as a finish of that. Now after I've paint stripped them, I give them a bit of a buff up and a polish using a Dremel with a wire wheel and some bronze wool pads, which I'd never even heard of until a subscriber sent me some. And they're just soft enough to shine up the metal to prepare it for the undercoat, but they don't remove any of that fine detail. So after I've buffed them up, I now always give them a fine coat of this grey Tamiya primer, which is just the best stuff. It goes on so fine it doesn't hide any of the details. Can you see? Look at those rivets, for example, at the bottom there. Absolutely amazing detail in these models. Remember, they are 50 years old. I know I keep saying that, but when I was a kid we never even looked at them twice. We just chuck them around and play with them in the sand pit. That one there's got some air vents beneath the window of the cabin. A nice little detail that is. Now these have been soaking for a couple of hours in the Dettol, and I thought I'd get them out and see how they go. So I've got these cotton tips, and look at that. That red paint is just being stripped off almost instantly. The only reason it's not all coming off, however, is because this is rather intricate little moulding with some grooves and edges on it, and the paint is just, you can't get it off because the cotton bud won't get into those tiny little gaps. See, my fingernail won't fit in there. Let's try these tyres now. The green paint comes off absolute treat. Minimal effort. It's just basically falling off like it's not even paint. Look at that. Now, the only problem I have here is that the red paint was put on pretty thick, and it's run into that groove between the tyre and the axle, and I can't physically get the cotton bud in there, so I bring my little wheel washing pad out of retirement. It's just a block of wood with a nail in it, and the head cut off the nail, and it's good just to like have somewhere to position the wheel whilst you're scrubbing it with a brush. And cleaning it up, and look at that there, got all those little bits out of that groove quite easily. So here's the plastic bits that have all been cleaned up. Now for this windscreen. As usual, I'm going to give it a bit of a polish. I'm using this Auto Sol, and it is actually the first time I've noticed aluminium polish. Now aluminium is quite a soft metal, as you know, and I guess that this plastic would be equally soft material, and that's probably why it works so well on this. And it really does. I found this out by accident, just experimenting with some stuff I had in the shed, and after I've rubbed it with a cotton bud, I polish it up with some makeup pads, and this is the first step. I do it twice usually. And then the third step is to immerse it into this self-shining floor polish, which was a great tip I got from an aircraft modeler that uses it for his canopies. Now the key is you don't want any air bubbles on it, because if, for example, like here, you can see those air bubbles, it will dry like that, and you'll end up with like a mock crack in the screen. So you have to keep dunking it and blowing on it and shaking it until you're happy that there's no air bubbles on it. And here I just put it undercover in this repurposed onion saver that was in our fridge. Had an onion in it, I chucked that out, and it's really useful. So that's enough for me for one day. It's like midnight. I'm going to leave all that stuff to dry, and I will come back tomorrow and resume. So next morning I have a good look at these parts that I primed yesterday. Some fantastic details on that refrigeration unit there. These models are incredibly detailed considering their age. The manufacturers did a fantastic job on them. There's a little couple of vents there beneath the windscreen. Nice touch. There's probably a battery box or a toolbox there on this side, a fuel tank on the other side. Now here's a spare part that I bought from recovertoy.com, and it's the rear door that was missing. And I'll tell you what, whoever made this had a lot of pride in their work, because this is a fantastic replica of an original part. and it fits beautifully in there. It cost about $8 Australian, I think, from memory. Now this is the paint that I mixed up yesterday. It's still fluid because I made it airtight there with that shrink wrap on there. So I've dipped it into my air gun and I'm hitting the ground running this morning. I'm going to get these painted so they'll be dry by this afternoon, and then I should be able to start putting it back together. I think I nailed it with this colour. It looks beautiful and it's going on really well. So I've given it a couple of coats, and I don't usually show it, but I always give my models a top coat of Tamiya high gloss finish, the varnish, and it really makes them pop. Now this is the number 3 Mr. Hobby paint, if you remember, the red. Closely matches the original colour. Give this a couple of coats also. And again, I will be giving this a top coat of Tamiya gloss varnish. Now this has been drying overnight, and I take it out and the floor polish has done its thing. And this transparency, I'm sure that you will agree, looks absolutely fantastic. So I'll put it in with the other bits here that are nearly ready to go back together. These tyres, the wheels and tyres, need a bit of a spruce up. So I'll put them on these cocktail sticks and give them some of this Tamiya Gloss Black X1 tyre wash that I made up. It's just very thin down gloss black paint. And you know, when you're playing with these toys, you can scuff the tyres up and they look a little bit dull. Well, this wash just absolutely brings them up like new again. So that's one side done. When they're dry, and it only takes 5 minutes, I'll flip them over and do the other side, and they'll be ready to put back on. Now here's the bumper bar and grille and headlight assembly there. Now the last one of these I did, because I've done 2, I coloured in with this liquid chrome pen. But that is actually the wrong thing to do. So instead I'm going to paint these with the grey primer and then some of this Tamiya clear coat, and hopefully they will look like grey plastic, which is what they should look like originally. And they turned out quite good. Now when I put my models back together, I usually use these small button-headed screws. But today I stuffed up and I drilled this hole a little bit too big, so I can't use those screws. Instead I'm going to use this pot rivet, which I don't often do, but I could glue it in, but I figured the pot rivet would be a better option. So now I have to drill through the tray. Usually I avoid doing that, but you won't know because the head of the rivet will be hidden inside the body of the cabin on the back of the truck. I mean, I have to put it back somehow, so you know, it's not ideal, but it should work. But before I do that, I have to put the wheels back on this assembly. So this is me modifying the end of that little rivet tail that I'm using for a change. And here, for those who don't have a drill press, is another option available, which is use a small ball peen hammer and just hit the end very gently 100 times or so, and you will just peen the end over like that, make it into a little mushroom, and it's as good as new. So now here's all the parts ready to put back together, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the finished product. To begin with, the first thing is to put in the rear door. The upper hinge pin goes into the roof recess, and the one at the bottom goes into this little hole on the tray of the truck. And then you align these 2 rivets with the holes in the roof and push it in. It clicks in quite nicely. And there's the replica door in position. Now it's time to refit the windscreen, and I'm using this clear silicone sealant, just a small blob. And I'm not actually doing anything with the base where it went into the cabin because it was such a tight fit that it's not going to come out without effort. So these are just display pieces, so they should look good on the shelf and they're not going to be played with. And I'm pretty sure it won't be falling apart. Now I put in the grey painted plastic base and I'm going to use this rivet to refit it to the model using this rivet gun. And there, the pop rivet has been squeezed flat by the tool and the tail has snapped off and it's held the base onto the body. So this is what we started with. As you remember, the previous owner painted it red and green. Similar colours but not quite the same. So I stripped all that paint off and gave it a new paint job. Put a new replacement door on the back, replaced the axles and spruced up the wheels. Also polished the windscreen and painted the plastic base. I think you'll agree it looks quite nice, almost original. And I do love these colours, the teal and the red. I think they complement each other perfectly. Now here's a few shots of my new truck parked out the front of Melbourne Zoo in Melbourne. Kevin sometimes comes down here on the weekends to visit some of his mates who he says are on the inside. This is the second refrigerator truck that I've done up, and here is the only picture you will see of the two together. Now you may have guessed, now I've got myself a little second job. I'm doing the odd delivery at the Melbourne Zoo, delivering frozen pilchards for the penguins to eat. Oh, in the back I get. Oh, I'm getting too old for this, I must say. These boxes of frozen pilchards don't get any lighter. Whew. What? Joey! 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 Kevin! Thank you so much for watching this episode of Marty's Matchbox Makeovers. I'll see you next time. Goodbye. Mother. Not this again.
You know, it's so fun on TV. What's happening? What's happening? So fantastic.
Must be the editing.
It's happening again.